I still remember the exact moment our eyes met, not because it was romantic, not because there were sparks, but because I was sitting in the back of a police car, handcuffed, mascara running down my face, and he was the officer who'd just arrested me outside a bar in West Hollywood at 2 in the morning. Let me back up. My name is Marcus, and 6 years ago, I was a complete mess. I'd just moved to Los Angeles from a small town in Ohio, where I'd spent 25 years pretending to be someone I wasn't. I'd finally come out, finally left behind the girlfriend I'd been stringing along, finally escaped my father's church and his expectations. And I was handling my newfound freedom exactly how you'd expect someone with 0 life experience and a decade of repressed emotions to handle it, which is to say, terribly. That night started like most of my nights back then. I'd gotten off work at the restaurant where I waited tables, changed into something tight that I thought made me look confident, and headed to the Abbey with some acquaintances I barely knew. I was drinking too much, dancing with strangers, trying to fill this enormous void inside me with noise and bodies and anything that would make me forget that I had no idea who I was or what I was doing with my life. Around midnight, some guy I'd been dancing with started getting aggressive, too handsy, too insistent. When I pushed him away, he grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise. I panicked. I'd never been in a fight in my life, but suddenly I was shoving him, and he was shoving back, and before I knew it, we were outside on the sidewalk, and I was screaming at him, and security was pulling us apart, and then there were flashing lights. The police showed up, 2 officers. One was older, gruff, clearly annoyed at having to deal with drunk kids outside a gay bar. The other was younger, tall, dark hair, these intense brown eyes that seemed to see right through me. That was Officer Daniel Reeves, though I wouldn't learn his first name until much later. The aggressive guy immediately started lying, saying I'd attacked him unprovoked. I was still drunk, still emotional, and I started yelling about how he'd grabbed me first. The older cop was already reaching for his handcuffs, clearly ready to arrest us both just to end the situation. But Daniel, he held up his hand. "Let me talk to this one," he said, nodding toward me. He walked me a few feet away from the crowd that had gathered. Up close, he was even more striking, maybe 30 years old. Strong jaw, this calm, steady presence that cut through my alcohol-fueled chaos like a knife. "What's your name?" he asked. "Marcus," I said, and my voice cracked. "Marcus, I need you to take a deep breath for me. Can you do that?" I tried. I really did. But instead, I just started crying. Not pretty crying. Ugly, snotty, hyperventilating crying. All the stress of the past year, all the loneliness, all the fear and confusion just came pouring out of me right there on Santa Monica Boulevard. "I'm sorry," I kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted him to stop touching me. I just wanted to have one good night. Just one." Daniel's expression softened. He glanced back at his partner, then at me. "The guy who grabbed you, did he hurt you?" I showed him my wrist. Even in the streetlight, you could see the red marks forming. He nodded slowly. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit in my patrol car for a bit while you calm down. I'm going to talk to some witnesses, and then we're going to figure this out. All right?" That's how I ended up in the back of a police car, watching through the window as Daniel interviewed people who'd seen what happened. His partner had already let the other guy go with a warning, which made me panic all over again. I was convinced I was going to jail. Convinced this was just another way I'd ruined my life. But then Daniel came back. He opened the door and squatted down so we were at eye level. "Witnesses confirmed your story," he said. "That guy grabbed you first. You were defending yourself. I'm not arresting you." The relief that flooded through me was so intense, I started crying again. "But," he continued, "I am concerned about you. You're pretty intoxicated. Do you have someone who can come get you? Someone you trust?" I shook my head. The truth was, I didn't really have anyone in Los Angeles, not anyone who cared enough to pick me up at 2 in the morning. Daniel sighed. "Where do you live?" "Silver Lake," I mumbled. "That's not too far. Tell you what, my shift ends in 20 minutes. I'll give you a ride home. Make sure you get there safe." I should have been suspicious, should have questioned why a cop would offer to drive me home, but I was exhausted and emotional, and something about him felt safe. So I just nodded. He closed the door gently, and I watched him finish up his shift, watched him fill out paperwork, watched him talk to his partner, who shot me a skeptical look before shrugging and heading to his own patrol car. And then Daniel was back, opening the door again, this time to let me out. "Come on," he said. "My personal car's in the lot behind the station." We walked in silence. He led me to an older Honda Civic, practical and clean. As we drove through the quiet streets of Los Angeles, I kept stealing glances at him. He'd changed out of his uniform into jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. Somehow that made him seem even more real, more human. "Thank you," I finally said, "for not arresting me. For this." "You didn't do anything wrong," he replied. "Well, except maybe drink too much, but that's not a crime." "I know I should probably slow down," I admitted. "On the drinking, on all of it. I just moved here a year ago, and I'm still trying to figure things out." "Where'd you move from?" "Ohio, small town, very conservative." He nodded like he understood. "That must have been hard." "You have no idea." The words came out before I could stop them. "Sorry, I don't usually trauma dump on strangers who've just not arrested me." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his whole face. "I've heard worse, trust me." We pulled up in front of my apartment building, a run-down complex that I could barely afford, even with 2 roommates. "This is me," I said. Daniel put the car in park but didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Marcus, can I give you some advice? And I know I'm just some cop you met tonight, so feel free to ignore me." "Okay," I said cautiously. "Whatever you're running from, you can't outrun it by destroying yourself. I see a lot of people in this city trying to find themselves by losing themselves. It never works." His words hit me harder than they should have, because he was right. That's exactly what I was doing. "How do you know?" I asked quietly, because I did the same thing when I first came out. Different city, same story. It took me a long time to figure out that being gay didn't mean I had to be a mess, that I could be myself and still have my life together. I looked at him, really looked at him. "You're gay?" "Yeah? Is that surprising?" "I just didn't think cops could be, open about it." "Times are changing, slowly, but they are." He pulled out his wallet and handed me a card. "This is going to sound weird, but there's a community center number on the back of this. They have support groups, resources. Helped me a lot when I first moved here. Might help you too." I took the card. It was his business card. Officer Daniel Reeves, LAPD. I flipped it over and saw a phone number written in pen with the words Rainbow Community Center. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." I got out of the car and watched him drive away, expecting that to be the end of it. Just another strange Los Angeles story. The hot cop who was nice to me that one time. But I kept his card, and 3 weeks later, when I hit what I can only describe as rock bottom, when I woke up in a stranger's apartment with no memory of how I got there, and finally admitted to myself that I needed help, I called that number on the back. The community center became my lifeline. I started going to support groups for people who'd come out later in life. I met others who understood the specific pain of leaving everything behind to live authentically. I started seeing a therapist. I cut way back on drinking. I began slowly to build an actual life instead of just surviving. 6 months passed. I was doing better, really better. I'd been promoted at the restaurant. I'd made actual friends. I was even thinking about going back to school. And then I saw him again. I was at a coffee shop in Silver Lake reading a book for the online class I'd enrolled in when someone sat down at the table next to me. I glanced up out of habit, and there he was, Daniel. Out of uniform, in running clothes, sweaty like he'd just finished a jog. He was ordering an iced coffee and hadn't noticed me yet. My heart started racing. I told myself not to say anything. He probably didn't even remember me. It had been 6 months. He probably gave his card to dozens of people. But then he turned, saw me, and his face broke into that same smile. "Marcus, hi," I managed. "Wow, how are you? Are you okay?" "Yeah, actually, I'm good, really good." And I realized it was true. "Can I?" He gestured to the empty chair at my table. "Please." He sat down, and we talked. Really talked. I told him about the community center, about therapy, about getting my life together. He told me about his work, about a case he was working on, about his family. We talked for over an hour until his coffee was long gone and the barista started giving us looks. "I should let you get back to your book," he finally said. Or, I heard myself say, "You could give me your number, your actual number, and maybe we could do this again sometime." Intentionally. He looked at me for a long moment and I couldn't read his expression. My stomach dropped. I'd misread the situation. He was just being nice. He probably had a boyfriend, or wasn't interested, or thought I was still a mess. But then he smiled. I'd like that. Though, full disclosure, I have a rule about not dating people I've arrested. "You didn't arrest me," I pointed out. "Technicality, you were in my patrol car, in the back seat, never actually arrested." He pulled out his phone. "What's your number?" That's how it started. We texted for a week before our first official date. Dinner at a quiet Italian place, nothing fancy. He was nervous, which surprised me. This confident cop, who'd seen everything, was nervous about having dinner with me. "I don't do this much," he admitted over pasta. "Dating. I'm usually pretty focused on work." "Why'd you say yes then? To me?" He set down his fork. "Honestly, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night. I kept wondering if you called the center, if you were okay. I almost looked you up a dozen times, but that would have been inappropriate. And then you just appeared in that coffee shop like some kind of sign." "I'm not usually someone's sign," I said. "Usually I'm someone's cautionary tale." "You're not a cautionary tale, Marcus. You're someone who was struggling and asked for help. That takes courage." Our first kiss happened in his car after that dinner. He drove me home again, just like that first night. But this time when we pulled up in front of my building, I didn't want to leave. We sat there talking until midnight, and then suddenly we weren't talking anymore. He leaned over and kissed me, gentle and careful, like I was something precious. I fell in love with him slowly, then all at once, with the way he'd show up at my apartment after his shift, exhausted but still wanting to see me, with how he'd text me random things throughout the day, just to make me laugh, with his patience when I had bad days and fell back into old patterns of self-doubt, with how he believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. 6 months into dating, I met his family. His mom, who hugged me like I was already part of the family. His dad, a retired firefighter who grilled me about my intentions with his son, until Daniel told him to knock it off. His younger sister, who pulled me aside and said, "I haven't seen him this happy in years. Don't screw it up." I didn't want to screw it up. For the first time in my life, I had something real, something worth protecting. A year after our first date, I moved in with him, into his small house in Echo Park with the overgrown garden and the cranky neighbor cat that would sit on our porch. We adopted a dog from a shelter, a pit bull mix that Daniel fell in love with immediately. We built a life together, quiet mornings and inside jokes and learning how to fight fair and making up afterward. 2 years in, I went back to school for real. Started working toward a degree in social work. I wanted to help people the way that community center had helped me. Daniel would quiz me for exams and proofread my papers and tell me he was proud of me so often I almost believed it. 3 years in, I finally introduced him to my family. My mom, who'd come around after I came out, but still struggled sometimes. My dad, who I hadn't spoken to in years. We drove to Ohio together, Daniel holding my hand the entire flight. My mom loved him immediately. My dad was stiff and awkward, but he shook Daniel's hand and called him son when we left, which was more than I'd expected. 4 years in, on the anniversary of the night we met, Daniel took me back to that same spot outside the Abbey. I thought it was weird going back to the scene of my lowest moment, but he had this look on his face, nervous and excited. 4 years ago, he said, I met this guy who was having the worst night of his life, and I thought he was beautiful, even crying and drunk and falling apart. I thought he was the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. I wanted to help him, wanted to know him, but I couldn't because that would have been inappropriate. Daniel, I started, but he kept going. And then I got a second chance. And this time I got to know him, got to watch him put himself back together, got to fall completely in love with him, got to build a life with him, and now I want to make sure he knows that I never want to let him go. He got down on one knee, right there on the sidewalk, in the same spot where I'd been handcuffed 4 years earlier. He pulled out a ring. Marcus, will you marry me? I was crying again, but this time they were happy tears. Yes, God, yes. We got married a year later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. His police buddies showed up in their dress uniforms. My friends from the community center were there. Even my dad came, though he left early. We danced to some cheesy love song and cut a cake and made promises to each other that I knew we'd keep. That was a year ago. Now we're in our house in Echo Park, the one we've slowly been fixing up. The garden's not overgrown anymore. The cranky neighbor cat still visits. Our dog is getting old, but still greets Daniel like he's been gone for years every time he comes home from a shift. Sometimes I think about that night, about how I was so lost and broken, about how I could have ended up somewhere completely different if Daniel had just arrested me and moved on. If he hadn't seen something in me worth saving, if I hadn't been brave enough to call that number, if we hadn't run into each other at that coffee shop. But we did. And here we are. Last week, I graduated with my degree in social work. Daniel was in the audience, cheering louder than anyone else. I start my new job next month at the same community center that helped me all those years ago. I'll be running support groups for people who are coming out later in life, people who are lost and scared and don't know how to be themselves yet. I'm going to tell them what Daniel told me that night, that whatever they're running from, they can't outrun it by destroying themselves. That being authentic doesn't mean being a mess, that it gets better, but only if you do the work. And I'm going to mean it, because I'm living proof. Tonight, Daniel's working a late shift. I'm home with the dog, making dinner, waiting for him to get back. When I hear his key in the lock, I'll kiss him hello. We'll eat together and talk about our days. Maybe we'll watch something on TV. Maybe we'll just sit on the couch with the dog between us. It won't be exciting or dramatic, but it will be real, and it will be ours. And it all started with the worst night of my life and the cop who decided to see me as a person instead of just another problem to solve. The man who gave me his card and his trust and eventually his heart. The man who became my husband. I never thought my life would look like this. Never thought I'd be this happy, this stable, this loved. Never thought the guy who put me in the back of his police car would end up being the person I'd want to spend the rest of my life with. But here we are. and I wouldn't change a single thing.